By now we've covered numerous new features and enhancements that you find in HTML5 that you can add to your site immediately to benefit your users, to benefit your search engine results, to benefit semantics, to benefit the overall web. What I'm going to talk about now is the remaining features that have been either spun out of HTML5 or associated with HTML5 that are, for the most part, not quite ready for production websites. And what do I mean by that? Well, most of these specifications have been spun out of HTML5 because they were a little bit advanced, and they're for intermediate or really advanced experiments. Now this means that they don't necessarily apply to all websites. They may only apply to some web applications here and there. However, I still feel that they're worth mentioning because those of you out there that have an interest in one of these areas may want to explore these further. The first of these is microdata. In the last 10 years, there's been a renaissance of the understanding of semantics and the semantic web overall. Starting in 2000s, when web designers as a whole shifted their use of class names from being presentational to being semantic, all the way through 2005 with the launch of microformats.org, which actually took a lot of that existing widespread practice of semantic class names and codified it into conventions that allow us to now exchange contact information, event information, reviews, and all other pieces of little micro content across the web between our desktop and our browsers and mobile devices. The whole notion of exchanging semantic information has reached the point where lots of folks want to create their vocabularies, want to exchange other information, and a lot of this has come to the point where we need a consistent way to do this in any markup. That's what microdata is. It's not really well supported. However, if you are into creating your own semantic markup, in particular, if you really like exploring vocabularies, creating your own vocabularies, take a look at microdata. If you tried things like RDFA in the past and found them cumbersome and perhaps not quite intuitive, you'll find that microdata solves perhaps like 99% of the same use cases, but with at least some of the simplicity of microformats. The next cutting-edge area of HTML5 is HTML device. HTML device specification for APIs that provide access through JavaScript to various aspects of the device, such as the video camera or input-output that you don't normally have access to a web page. However, if you wanted to build something, say like a video conferencing application or perhaps some sort of video streaming application, you'll want access to the camera or the video camera or the microphone or other such alternative input devices of your laptop or potentially a mobile device as well. The HTML device specification seeks to codify these APIs in a standard that web developers will be able to eventually use. The WebSockets API, we've seen this amazing use of AJAX over the past several years for more and more interactive websites, and we've seen clients communicating with servers asynchronously, we've seen IRC clients, we've seen games. What WebSockets does is take that to a lower, more fundamental level so that you can actually have higher bandwidth communication between web browsers, between servers and clients, and allow you to do all that from JavaScript directly. Now, not all applications really need that capability, but some of them can actually really use it. So if you're building such an application that has a lot of network traffic, that has a lot of communication that you want to keep lower latency, take a look at WebSockets API, explore it, see if it works for you. A few more bleeding edge specifications. Some of these weren't even spun off, but rather just related to HTML5 and may even have minimal or experimental browser support, which is why I want to call out a few of these particular. The first is Web SQL database. This one's actually pretty big. A lot of web applications and websites today are built around a client-server architecture where on the server there's a database of information, oftentimes in MySQL, that's served up bits and pieces at a time, constructed into an HTML page, and served to the user, to the browser, where the browser views it, manipulates it, perhaps submits a form, and the data goes back to the database, gets updated there. What are examples of these client-server browser database applications? Wikipedia. Wikipedia is built on MediaWiki, which itself has a server component that's built with PHP and MySQL. Every time you use Wikipedia and query it, you're asking the server to look in this MySQL database to come up with what is it that you're looking for and then using PHP constructs a page and serves it to you. Well, the Web SQL database specification provides a standard SQLite API for the client. So what does this mean? What does it mean for the client to have a database? Well, what this enables is you can actually take code that was traditionally run on the server, convert it to, say, JavaScript, right, that uses SQL commands, and create a complete client-server database application that runs on the client completely. I think that the implications of this haven't fully been realized, but the possibilities here could mean anything from running your own complete copy of a wiki on your own local browser, never mind your own server, and then potentially communicating with the server and syncing changes back and forth. I think there's a lot of potential here, mostly for experiments though. If Web SQL database is like the industrial storage solution for creating big storage client-based solutions, web storage is the simple extension of what we typically use cookies for today. So if you use cookies to store some client-side information, typically it's like login info, maybe a few site preferences, but not that much information. Web storage expands this. It takes the really simple to understand property value model that almost every programmer understands and knows by heart and extends it to the browser so that if you have a web page and the user's entered a whole bunch of data, you can actually be persisting that data in the browser so that if they close their browser window or if it accidentally quits or something else happens, when they reopen their browser window and re-access your page will have access to that web storage that you've been saving on the client side. This also helps for situations where you want to allow the user to continue using your website and making changes even while you're offline. And then when the browser goes back online, to sync those changes back with the server. I think that web storage has a lot of potential to turn a lot of today's applications that depend on a continuous internet link to working even when you're offline. And so I'm pretty excited about web storage. In addition to web storage, there's two more areas that I want to point out of HTML5's bleeding edge that I think are worth looking into. The first is web workers. How many times have you been on a website and you've run into the rainbow beach ball cursor of death, or perhaps the hourglass cursor of death? It's really annoying. Anytime I find that I'm browsing a website and it just starts spinning, my browser locks up, you know what's usually at fault? Well, not counting plugins, of course. JavaScript. Too much JavaScript that the website is running, that's taking up the processes, is taking up all the processors on your computer, slowing everything down, making it less interactive. Well, web workers is a solution to this problem as long as the web designer or web developer wants to take advantage of it. One of the challenges traditionally in developing a web application is that any script, anything that you wanted to run in response to a user action had to be run in the same thread as the user's interactivity. Web workers gives the developer the option to actually fork off another thread to run JavaScript and run processes, computations, things that are processor intensive, asynchronously with the user's own frontmost interactive process. And this has the excellent feature that the web developer can focus on the JavaScript that's in the user process on only user interactions, and anything else, loading data, processing data, all that kind of thing can be done in separate threads. That's why they're called workers. The final API that I'd like to point out to you that's on the bleeding edge of HTML5 is geolocation. Geolocation has become a really hot topic in recent years, especially with the emergence of sites like Foursquare and previous to that, Dodgeball. Geolocation has become the source of a lot of really interesting social networking, social websites. What Geolocation API does is present the ability for a web page to actually query the user's location. Now, of course, there's permissions models built into this, and web browsers that implement the Geolocation API have to ask the user, hey, do you want to allow this website to know your location? And at that point, the user is given the option of providing the information to the website or not. The website, though, is now given the ability to ask. So if a website says, well, I can now search for restaurants near where you are, if you'd like, rather than having to tell you to enter your location and then search for it. I could even actively track you, just for you, where you are, and then perhaps let you know if any of your friends are nearby, similar to what these Foursquare applications do today. Now, the implementation level of all of these varies from browser to browser, and it's one of those things that's constantly in flux. So, if you're going to develop using some of these APIs of HTML5, using the bleeding edge of HTML5, as you would expect, what you need to do is make sure that you read the documentation specific to those browsers for those APIs and keep up with them. Just as any web developer knows that coding to the API of a specific website is at any moment subject to change, coding to some of these APIs is also subject to change because the browsers are implementing all these APIs which are in draft format specifications. By working draft, what that means is that the W3C can change those APIs at any moment, and implementations can't necessarily depend on them. What does that mean for you today? It means that you have to, if you're going to build applications that depend on these APIs, you need to either keep up with the development of HTML5, or you need to build your applications in such a way that if and when the APIs change, that they fail gracefully, that they don't actually put up unexpected errors. However, given all those caveats, I still say there's a lot of opportunity here to explore and expand the future web applications and help move the web forward. So for more details on all of these bleeding edge APIs of HTML5, please see the accompanying booklet or text that describes where to find more information and provides URLs to these specifications as well as what you can potentially do with them.